Policeman, what crimes did you see the aftermath of that were so cool that you didn't want to arrest the criminal? I had a case in my first year as an officer where a drunk man launched his car off a boat ramp. We approximated that he was going 50 miles per hour and the car landed in 20 feet of water. Now for the cool part, he swam out, ran 8 miles to his uncle's house and stole his tow truck. He then drove the truck back, swam down and hooked the tow cable to the axle of the car and then proceeded to pull the tow truck into the water as well. We were called on scene and we could only see the headlights and the tip of the hood above water. He was passed out asleep on the dock next to it. People who have actually wrestled with a step relative, what was the aftermath? We were on a family holiday in Spain and the apartment was quite small, so a few of us slept in the living room. I was almost asleep when I heard my stepsister blow on my older brother. I had forgotten about the sounds until now, so thanks bro. I don't think they wrestled without me knowing, but there wasn't any aftermath besides extreme awkwardness on my part for the rest of the holiday and a significant time afterwards. Not me but my older brother. For years the story was he got the clap from this older woman who took his virginity. A month ago he told me the truth. He got it from our stepsister, who at one point tried to sleep with me too. What's the biggest bullet you've dodged? I was 8 and when I went to stay with my dad on the weekend, I would sleep in his camper. The door was broken and you had to stick a knife in it to pry it open. Being only 8, I wasn't strong enough to open it by myself, so had to get my dad to do it. One weekend I stayed with my dad. We went to a family member's party. Being Mexicans, the party went on through the night. About midnight or so he came and asked me if I was ready to go home. He said he would drop me off so I could get some sleep, but I was having a good time and opted to stay. A couple hours later he came and got me and we headed home to see the camper fully engulfed in flames. My grandma was outside and had burns all over her hands and forearms and a big one on her scalp from trying to get inside. She was sure I was still in there and was sobbing hysterically when we pulled up. What was your scariest something's not right moment? I was walking to middle school and this lady with a car pulled over next to me and called me Linda. That's not my name, but she was close enough. I looked up. She apologized and explained she thought I was her grandkid. Then she offered me a ride to school, except that I was already standing on the school grounds. I had a half-block walk before I needed to turn into the building. When I said no, she tried to demand I get into the car. I said no thanks and took off running. It occurred to me much later that she probably had no intention of dropping me off at school. Survivors of attempted murder, what's your story? I was stabbed in the stomach during a bar fight and I passed out from blood loss. When I came to, I was in the hospital. The surgeon who patched me up let me know that had I not been stabbed I could have died from my appendix bursting. Apparently without realizing it, my appendix was perforated, nothing related to the stab wound. What I thought was just some cramps was actually a life-threatening time bomb, and thanks to being almost stabbed to death I got to live. Psychiatrists of Reddit, what was the most obvious attempt to fake insanity you've seen? Had a mother come in and insist that her child had Silver-Russell syndrome. It's not that easy to fake as it's a bunch of metabolic conditions mixed with congenital abnormalities. The kid was small, but not that small. He didn't weigh much. All of this with the right arm length 2 centimeters more than the left side, were borderline criteria for Silver-Russell. We did genetic testing, which came back negative, but 30% of cases are negative. So the deciding factor was one of the soft criteria of hypoglycemia. Once she heard about this, she came back with the kid in a coma, but when the kid was in the hospital he was never hypoglycemic. He went home and came back again in a coma a few weeks later. Again, as soon as he was eating normally at the hospital he was never hypoglycemic. Turns out she starved her child into comas repeatedly for the diagnosis of Silver-Russell. I believe it was for money, since in Canada you get money when your child has a genetic disability. If it was legal, I would have slapped some sense into that bitch. What is a dirty business tactic that you know and everyone should be aware of it? The huge prize scams at car dealerships. You get a flyer in the mail that says scratch off X to see if you won. You always win the biggest prize, but when you read the fine print you actually only win the right to spin some wheel or put your name in a box for a drawing. The employees' friends and family always actually get the prize. Your win is just a tactic to get you into the dealership. Here's where you can pay back. A fun thing to do is waste the manager's time. Go to the dealership, prize flyer in hand. Find a nice car. One with all of the options. Ask for every dealer add-on they offer and tell them you don't want to waste time negotiating, you have cash. Talk to the manager and insist on a test drive with them. Convince them you want to buy the car and get to the paperwork phase. Just before you sign, inform them that they haven't sold you a car. They've sold you the idea of buying a car. Get the manager's card and tell them you'll be dropping their card in a hat with other dealerships' cards. A card will be selected at random and the dealership will be notified by mail in 4 to 6 weeks. Let them know that the actual car you buy may not be the one used in your promotion. Club bouncers. What was your worst or weirdest night like? I worked at a pretty small club. Usually 3 or 4 bouncers and me. Whenever we had a call on the radio about a fight we all had to respond. However, all the bouncers were giant Michael Clark Duncan looking guys, and when the place was packed they had some trouble getting through the crowd. I however was much slimmer than they and would often end up being the first to arrive. Well, one time I was the first to arrive to a fight by the stage. All I remember is showing up, dodging one punch and then trying to grab a guy. That was it. Next thing I know I wake up in a hospital bed. They eventually showed me the camera footage. Right after I grabbed the guy, another picked up one of our heavy wooden seats and bashed my head with it. It was scary to watch. However, one of the bouncers and I were really good friends, and as soon as he saw me get hit he plowed through the crowd like a raging rhino. I barely even touched the ground before he grabbed me, hoisted me onto his shoulder, punched the chair guy and clotheslined one other on his way to get me to safety. Police officers, what are the most ridiculous cover stories you've heard from people you were questioning? Some kids were shooting bottle rockets, no big deal, but they were in an area where there had been some burglaries, so we checked it out. There were 3 of them when we pulled up, maybe 14 years old. Here's the thing though, they were pretty well cornered. On one side was a pond, on another side was a huge fence with barbed wire, and finally there was one side with an unclimbable embankment that led to some railroad tracks. Like I said, we had them cornered. 2 of them take off for the embankment and hide in the grass while one runs towards the fence. Well, the 2 that ran for the embankment were pretty well hidden, but Mr. Solo realized the fence had barbed wire, panicked and decided to lay flat on his belly in ankle-high grass, hoping we couldn't see him. We walked up and asked him to get to his feet. Nothing. We repeated the directions. Do you know what he did? He rolled over, faked the biggest yawn he could muster and started stretching this way and that. Then he asked, "Sorry, what?" I was just sleeping. The whole scene was too funny. The officer and I start hysterically laughing, tell the kid he's not in trouble and remind him not to run from the police. This kid really thought he could pretend he just woke up from a nap after we had just watched him sprint across the field and lay down. Good times. What is the most tasteless joke you've ever heard? A woman was in a coma. She had been in it for months. Nurses were in her room giving her a sponge bath. One of them was washing her private area and noticed that there was a slight response on the monitor when she touched her. They tried it again and sure enough there was definite movement. They went to her husband and explained what happened, telling him, as crazy as this sounds, maybe a little oral stuff will do the trick and bring her out of the coma. The husband was skeptical, but they assured him that they'd close the curtains for privacy. The husband finally agreed and went into his wife's room. After a few minutes the woman's monitor flatlined, no pulse, no heart rate. The nurses run back into the room. "What happened?" they cried. The husband said, "I'm not sure, I think maybe she choked." Lawyers of Reddit, what was your oh shit moment in court? I was representing a plaintiff in a hit-and-run case. Plaintiff is testifying and is, despite several hours of prep the previous day, an absolutely terrible witness for her own case. She couldn't even identify the street she was crossing when she was hit by the car. The oh shit moment came during cross-examination. Defense counsel pulls out a picture of my client dressed up and ready to hit the club, which was posted to Facebook the day after the alleged accident. I object because the timestamp refers to when it was posted, not when it was taken. Defense counsel showed the picture to my client and asked her when the picture was taken. Sure enough, she says it was taken the day after the accident when she was supposedly in unbearable pain. Oh shit. Bosses of Reddit, what's the craziest thing you've seen an employee do? I manage a small weld shop. Generally I don't care about clean background checks or pot, as long as you come into work every day and get shit done. Finding reliable welders is difficult, so a lot flies. This sometimes leads to weird employees. This one guy we hired just stopped showing up. After like 3 days, he walks in the door. He's bright red from sunburn and his clothes are torn to shreds. Dude was drinking on a little boat and somehow got lost at sea. He didn't have cell phone reception, so he wasn't able to call me. He took a bunch of pictures over the few days he was lost at sea, including one where he was being rescued by the Coast Guard. Coast Guard took him to the hospital, he checked himself out and then immediately came into work. Didn't even go home and shower. Ah dude. I gave him the rest of the week off.